Hello everyone, welcome to another amazing video. If you enjoy the content, I ask that you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the upcoming parts and new videos. Now, without further ado, let's get into today's video. Are you ready? Let's go.
We start with Prota marking some alternatives on a sheet. He says it's completely horrible for reading. His name is Gamin Yoon, and he says that in the end, studying isn't everything in life, right? That really wasn't his thing. Gamin then throws his pencil on the table and says, "Damn." In fact, he was lying. He really wanted to be very good at studying. He wonders why his grades aren't good even though he has tried so hard. He moves on with a smile on his face, knowing there's a new book in the library that he will read at night. As he approaches the room, Gamin sees two people standing, wondering if the reason for his failure was because there was no one at his house to help him. One of the teachers standing informs the other girl that he has arrived. The teacher then introduces the girl to Gamin, saying her name was Hank Young, and she would be the new tutor. Gamin is surprised by the beauty of this new tutor, while the teacher says that she will start today, so please let him be cooperative. Gamin looks away shyly and says yes, he will be cooperative. Gamin then sneaks out quietly while the teacher tells the tutor not to worry, as Gamin is very shy. The tutor says everything's fine. The teacher then says it was important to tell her another thing that she needed to know. The teacher then whispers to the tutor, saying that Gamin has been having difficulties lately with some rather questionable things. The tutor chuckled lightly, telling her not to worry about it. So, after leaving school, we see time passing. The tutor was teaching Gamin about linear equations. She explains that you need to move all the numbers to the left and asks if Gamin understood. He answers yes. She then happily says that Gamin learns very quickly, and if he continues at that pace, his grades will improve a lot. Still with a smile on her face, she asks him to accompany her again, asking him to raise his hand and shout out loud, "I can do it!" Gamin tries, but without much enthusiasm. The teacher asks him to put more energy into his words until he finally manages to shout out loud, "I can do it!" After that, 2 years passed. Gamin was already 17 years old, now in another university. However, he still insists that his grades have not improved. He even emphasizes that his tutor was very competent and friendly, but the problem was that when it came to studying, he wasn't very smart. At that moment, a fight between two students started next to him, even both of them throwing themselves on Gamin's table. The fight then continues frantically, while the whole class stands up shouting, "Fight! Fight! Fight! Fight!" It was punch after punch. The two students didn't stop fighting while the whole class cheered them on to continue fighting. Gamin was sitting on the floor frustrated with the situation, saying that because of his terrible learning ability, he ended up entering the worst technical engineering school. He then picks up his crumpled notebook from the floor while saying he was still terrible at studying. He tries to clean up his notebook a bit since it was on the floor, and starts to think about how he wanted to avoid that for a while. And that was his depressing story of how he got into university. He says that school is called Yusong Technical Engineering School, a rotten university nicknamed the Criminal Talent School. Gamin then adjusts his glasses while explaining that trying to study in a place like that is completely useless, but in a dump like that, there are always people who don't give up. He says this as a fight happens frantically in the classroom. Gamin then is reading a book. He imagines his motto is, "To hell with circumstances, I create opportunities." He says that to find these opportunities, he chose that dump of a school willingly. It was his only hope to enter a university with courses of only 4 years. With that, get a limited route called technical school screening. He says this looking outside where there are 3 people smoking. While looking at those guys, Gamin explains that in a place with so many gangsters who don't care about studying, that would be the perfect opportunity for him to stand out and get the best grades. Gamin says all he needed to do was survive in that place for 3 years, saying this as one of the gangsters notices Gamin looking at them. This gangster then shouts asking what that idiot is looking at outside. Does he want to die? Gamin immediately cowers in fear of those people. Gamin continues scared, wondering if they saw his face. Definitely, the Yusong Technical School was a cockfight where fights were everywhere. Some time passed, and now Gamin was in the classroom. He imagined how that place was carnivorous where they attacked everyone. Gamin acted as if he didn't even exist there, just staying late to get a good grade. Gamin's goal was just to get into university and be a true winner. At that moment, the teacher announces that they will have a new substitute in place of Mr. Hyung-goon since he resigned. Gamin then looks forward, not believing what he sees. The teacher then introduces the new substitute. It was Professor Hank Young, Gamin's old tutor. The then teacher says hello to everyone. It was a pleasure to meet them. Gamin can't disguise his surprised look at what he was seeing. His old tutor from 2 years ago will now be his new teacher. He then remembers when she taught him, always saying everything was wrong in the subjects, but it was all right in the end. Or another moment when she patted his head when he finally got one right, saying that now he just needed to get the others right. Gamin also remembers when his old tutor asked him what his dream was. He is silent for a moment, and then answers that it was to enter a university. She laughs lightly, saying that was too vague. She then gave an example of how it was in her case. The old tutor said at the time that her wish was to get a certificate to teach there and teach abroad. The tutor then, looking out the window, says she would like to be a good teacher who can help new students start their lives. That's the kind of teacher she would like to be. Back to the present. The room didn't quiet down even with the new teacher's presentation. It was a terror in that classroom. Some people throwing paper balls on one side, others talking, others sleeping. A true nightmare in the classroom. The principal then starts to leave the room, saying he was counting on Professor Hank Young to handle things. The teacher then becomes desperate, not knowing what to do, asking the principal to wait a moment. From what Gamin heard, the teacher failed the certificate test, and that's why she was there now. The teacher was embarrassed by all that noise, one student saying, "Damn, she's not my type, haha." Another student saying, "Ooh, it's a girl, a girl." The teacher was already worried about that classroom. The teacher then slaps the table, asking everyone to be quiet. She then prepares to say the rules and asks everyone to pay attention, but at the same moment, a bottle comes towards her face. Gamin is startled to see that. The teacher is also startled to see a bottle coming towards her face. She then tries to protect herself as the bottle hits her arm hard. There were 3 students responsible for that. More precisely, a guy with orange hair called Hyunwoo, who threw the bottle, saying they don't have time for rules and she should hurry up and finish the class. As the teacher cleans herself from what was inside the bottle, the students started saying that Hyunwoo is crazy for throwing that at the teacher, and that he really doesn't hesitate. The bottle overflowed with a pink liquid as other students said that student was crazy, and that he threw it without thinking twice. At that moment, another student stands up behind Hyunwoo, calling him an idiot because of that bottle of his. Hyunwoo just laughs, mocking and asking the guy who he thinks he's calling an idiot. "Are you retarded?" said Hyunwoo. The student who owns the bottle gets furious, asking how Hyunwoo dares to stare at him, since he's nothing but a bastard. Suddenly, the student who owns the bottle goes flying out the window with a kick from Hyunwoo, leaving the teacher completely shocked at what was happening, while the students start wondering if Hyunwoo is back to fighting again, since in April alone he fought 50 times. Hyunwoo then jumps out through the broken window, asking the other student if he's crazy to think that just because they hang out together, he thinks they're on the same level. The two then prepare to fight, gathering a bunch of students to watch this fight, and they are glad to see that now the fight will be in the flower garden. One student even bets 10 reais on Hyunwoo, because it's obvious he will win. Hyunwoo then prepares to punch, saying that his victory is already guaranteed. In the middle of the fight, a monitor starts running towards them, shouting for all those losers to stop it. The monitor running at full speed complains that whenever there's a fight, it's those damn worms that are fighting. The students shout for everyone to run away, as Tom was coming to end the fight. Upon arriving at the fight scene, Tom is very tired, saying he hates these kids for giving him so much trouble, that maybe Tom should stop running like a maniac. The teacher just watches Tom, breathless. Tom then, looking nervous, asks the teacher why she was just standing there watching, and didn't do anything. The teacher says it's not like that. Tom still says he's not even surprised anymore by these temporary teachers who have no sense of responsibility. The teacher is shocked to hear that from him. Tom then leaves, telling the teacher to clean all the broken glass from that window. The teacher then gets a broom to clean up all the glass shards. She then injures herself trying to pick them up, getting a small cut on her finger from the glass shards. She then starts looking at her finger and begins to cry at the sad situation. At that moment, someone arrives offering an adhesive bandage to her. The teacher then turns around thanking for the gesture and is surprised to see who that person was. She asks if it was really Gamin or if she was seeing things. They then go to another place. There she says she was shocked to see him. She never imagined that the two of them would meet like this again. The teacher then tells Gamin that maybe she shouldn't have stopped being a tutor just to try to earn a certificate. She regrets that decision. Gamin then replies that anyway it was her wish, so there's not much to do. Gamin then turns to the teacher and asks if she plans to continue teaching at that terrible school. The teacher is silent, imagining that that was just the beginning, that it had gotten so bad that even the former teacher resigned in a month. But she couldn't give up without trying. The teacher then smiles at Gamin and says that actually, she has barely started, and that even if she can't show the right way, If they face their problems, they can be put on the right path. That's what she believed, said teacher Hunk-young, with a big smile on her face. Gamin is surprised to hear that from the teacher and asks if she's sure about that. At that moment, Hyunwoo's group comes towards them. Gamin asks the teacher to do everything to avoid those people. The teacher questions why. Hyunwoo's group asks what he's going to say to Kim. Hyunwoo says he doesn't know and doesn't care either. Gamin explains to the teacher that Hyunwoo's gang is made up of the most brutal thugs in the whole school. Gamin continues to explain that at first, Hyunwoo was just a bastard who didn't listen. Before finishing his sentence, Gamin realizes that the teacher is no longer by his side. He then looks forward and sees the teacher asking Hyunwoo's group to put out the cigarette they're smoking. Hyunwoo asks if she's going crazy by any chance. Gamin, upon seeing that scene, already thinks the worst. Hyunwoo, who until then was patient, understands that she is a newbie, so she doesn't know. But there are no rules there when it comes to smoking, explained Hyunwoo. He even commented that the guys even left a trash can just for them to throw the cigarette butts away, since the person who cleaned up gave up and let them do it themselves. The teacher then interrupts him, saying that it wasn't about rules or anything like that. Hyunwoo is confused by what she was trying to say. She then tries to explain that it's about values, but that anyway his health should come first, so she was asking them to stop smoking. The teacher then grabs Hyunwoo's hand, saying she was just trying to help him, that one step at a time he would manage to quit smoking. Hyunwoo gets angry, saying she was nagging. Gamin continues to watch them from afar, wondering if that would really work. Hyunwoo then says it's okay and throws his cigarette on the ground, asking the teacher if it was okay like that, since she was very irritating. The teacher happily says it was perfect. Hyunwoo, embarrassed, asks if she really is going to help them quit smoking. At that moment, Hyunwoo reaches out his hand to the teacher, and Gamin then is shocked by what he just saw. Hyunwoo has just slapped the teacher's face while asking his group if it was the first time they had seen a student hitting a teacher. Hyunwoo thinks it's fair, since teachers also hit students all the time. A gang member, laughing, says that the teacher apparently was so shocked that she fell to the ground. Another member, also laughing, said that if the teacher decides to report them, it will end up being good, because it will make the news with the headline, "The Downfall of Teachers' Authority," and everyone starts laughing. Hyunwoo then starts to smile, asking if she really thinks anyone there will help her. After all, she's just a temporary person in that school. The teacher couldn't hide her frightened face after receiving a slap from a student. The teacher then, still scared, asks the students not to do that temporary teachers are also people. The students continue to laugh, saying that this teacher is good at talking shit, that they can't believe she's actually saying that. Hyunwoo, with a menacing smile, says that apparently the teacher hasn't been hit enough, while another student asks if the teacher doesn't know the saying, "You have to learn the hard way." Hyunwoo reaches his hand to the teacher, while she falls into tears, begging them not to do that. The teacher still tries to say that if they grow up to be bad people. Hyunwoo observes what she meant by that and flicks her forehead, telling her to stop fooling around. Gamin watches in horror as they do that to the teacher, while the students continue saying that it's none of her business what they will be when they grow up. The three students then reach their hands to the teacher, telling her to shut up, that if she really wants to help, she should give them money, and if she really gives them money, then they will stop smoking. The teacher then just closes her eyes, crying and fearing the worst. Gamin couldn't control himself seeing that situation. He begins to remember his tutor smiling as she looked out the window, telling him about her dreams, stroking his hair while teaching him, happy while trying to teach him anyway. While he got all the questions wrong, and even when she asked him to shout with energy, Gamin then approaches the teacher and the group. The students ask who he was. One of the students answers that he is a cockroach from the same class as them. Hyunwoo asks why he was there. Does he also want money? Gamin then bends down and puts his shirt over the teacher, while saying he warned her that reason doesn't work with those students. He then apologizes for leaving his clothes with her, but his mother would beat him if she found his clothes dirty. The teacher just says, "Is it you, Gamin?" One of the gang members gets irritated at seeing that scene, saying it wasn't a drama series, and lifts his leg to attack Gamin, telling him to get out of the way. Gamin then hits his arm against the student's leg and throws himself on top of him, knocking him down with all his force. Hyunwoo and the other students start making fun of the situation, saying that it really looked like a cockroach crawling when stepped on, and that the situation was very funny. The student then gets up with a headache, telling everyone to shut up, since he was caught off guard, and that's why he got knocked down. The student then tries to retaliate, going after Gamin and calling him crazy for doing that. Gamin then is startled by the situation he just created, saying that there's something he forgot to mention. The student then, full of anger, prepares to punch Gamin in the face. Gamin then recalls when he said his motto is, "To hell with circumstances, I create opportunities," and carried a new book to read at night. That was when he first met tutoring Hunk Young and hid the book behind his back in embarrassment. That book was about self-defense by Bruce Lee, who is also an actor in several kung fu movies. Gamin then positions himself to retaliate the blow and hits the student squarely with one of the techniques he learned from reading that self-defense book, throwing the student away while everyone continues to mock the situation. The student who just took the blow asks what just happened, while Gamin stands poised like a true fighter. Hyunwoo says that Gamin is really crazy and now wishes to face him. Hyunwoo runs towards Gamin, surprised that Gamin is not scared at all by the situation. At that moment, more memories come to Gamin's mind. When he met tutoring Hunk Young, and the principal said how shy Gamin was, but that she was counting on him to make everything work out. After that, Gamin trained martial arts all the time in order to try to lose that shyness. Gamin spent hours watching videos on the internet about fighting. His body was already completely adapted to fight. Back to the present, Gamin then raises his foot and does a backflip, kicking Hyunwoo's chin and throwing him away with all his strength, while Gamin falls to the ground without much trouble. The other two gang members are shocked by what they just saw. Hyunwoo was completely knocked out on the ground. It was an unprecedented scene. The gang members, completely scared, flee the scene, shouting at Gamin that he would regret everything. Gamin fixes his hair as he is relieved to have handled the situation without much trouble. The teacher is surprised by what she just saw. Gamin begins to walk towards her and she doesn't know what to say. Gamin then stands face to face with the teacher. He extends his hand asking if she was so sad because she stopped being Gamin's tutor. The teacher continues to look surprised at him. Gamin then asks her not to leave that school and to continue teaching him how to be good at studying. After all, Gamin was still very bad at it. At that same moment, a muscular man was training next to a member of Hyunwoo's gang. The muscular man comments to the gang member that there were rumors that some guy finished off Hyunwoo with just one blow. The whole school was already aware of this rumor. One of the students, while smoking, smiles and asks if Gamin was looking for trouble. And did Gamin now earn the nickname Iron Fist? What a joke, said the student. Another student, while playing pool, says, what's the problem with rumors? After all, if someone messes with his friend, then it will be 2 against 1. Another student from the school says that Gamin doesn't have many options now. He needs to leave that school with his tail between his legs or stay and die in the process. Gamin then, still facing and staring at the teacher, extends his hand to help her. The teacher, still shaken by the situation, cries to see how kind Gamin was being at that moment. The teacher then takes Gamin's hand, accepting his help. Now the next day, Gamin was warming up to start his training. A guard who is nearby remarks how amazing it is that Gamin is there at his usual time. Gamin then starts his abdominal training while the park guard watches, saying that Gamin's body has great proportions and that youth is very good. Gamin then does several extraordinary exercises, some of which are not possible for just anyone to do. The guard is amazed by Gamin's stamina, saying that his training is incredible. Gamin then moves to a rocking horse. That exercise was extremely difficult, and Gamin was already sweating a lot while doing it. The guard then, smiling, says that no matter how many times he sees Gamin training, it's always amazing to watch. Gamin was balancing on top of the rocking horse using only his hands. That was an extremely difficult exercise to do. Gamin is then startled to hear the guard say that he forgot to mention, but 34 minutes had already passed since Gamin started training. Gamin then falls off the rocking horse, startled, while the guard asks if he's okay. Gamin then adjusts his glasses and thanks the guard for the help that day, but he needs to run off because he's late. The guard says it's okay. Gamin then returns to his apartment on the 14th floor. He seems scared that someone might see him. He then carefully opens the door to his apartment. Upon entering, he puts a battery back in the electronic door lock, as he always removes it to sneak out. However, upon putting it back, the lock system starts making a lot of noise. Gamin wonders why the lock always has to make so much noise. That was the most dangerous moment for him because of that noise. Gamin then runs at full speed to his bed, lies down, and covers his body with his blanket. He starts counting down in his head, and within the next few seconds, Gamin's mother enters his room asking him to wake up, as it was time to leave for school. Gamin narrowly avoided being caught sneaking back from training. While Gamin was still getting up, his mother tells him to hurry up and stop being lazy, that he could have breakfast on the way to university. Gamin just responds with an okay. Gamin then finally gets up and says he's ready for another day. At the same time elsewhere, Professor Hank Young also wakes up, saying that last night she only managed to sleep for 3 hours. She then begins to recall her conversation with Gamin when she was attacked by the gang. Gamin had said that, unfortunately, in that school, it was already too late to try to help the students in terms of behavior. While Hank Young was feeling down, Gamin continued to say that it was too late to show the right path to the students, as she had said. Gamin still says that he is worried that things will get worse in the future. The professor then snaps back to reality, shaking her head, telling herself not to get discouraged like that. After all, she needs to remember the reason she became a teacher. She then gets out of bed, saying that, even though she is scared, in the end, she will make it, for sure. Later at the university, the students start arriving little by little. Professor Hank Young also arrives at that moment. She was completely terrified at that moment, looking at that university and imagining how bad it could be. But she tried to motivate herself, saying to herself, "It's okay, it's okay." At that moment, Gamin also arrives at the engineering technical school and spots the pensive professor. Gamin stays silent, wondering what the professor is thinking at that moment. Gamin then goes to the classroom, saying that his first step to get into the university is to find someone else who also wants to enter the university. Upon entering the classroom, Gamin notices that Hyunwoo's gang had skipped that day. Gamin then starts looking at the students in that class, trying to find someone with an aura that wants to enter the university. Right off the bat, the first student was only thinking about sleeping, so he definitely wasn't the one. Another student spent hours looking at perverted magazines, so he also had no future. The third student, Gamin observes, gives off a good vibe of being studious, as he was focused on doing his tasks. Gamin says that student, named Sehyun, definitely has an aura that will get him into university. Gamin then approaches Sehyun, greeting him. Sehyun is puzzled by the situation. Gamin then tries to make a connection between them, saying that Sehyun seems to be putting in a lot of effort at that technical school. Gamin then says that any day he would like to learn math from Sehyun. Sehyun slams the table as he stands up. Sehyun starts to leave the classroom, shouting at Gamin to stop bothering him. After all, Gamin didn't look like someone who would get into university. Gamin is surprised to hear that, thinking that he does want to get into university. But it's a pity that apparently he doesn't give off that vibe of will get into university. Sehyun is heading to the bathroom right after leaving the classroom. He starts washing his hands while thinking that he has been annoying for a few days, and wonders what the hell Gamin wants. After all, if they become friends, they both become targets of the school delinquents. While Sehyun is thinking about all this, someone touches his shoulder. He looks to the side, surprised, and slaps that hand, cursing Gamin, imagining that hand was Gamin's and that he followed Sehyun into the bathroom. However, that hand wasn't Gamin's. It was Wang's, a second-year student in hydraulic engineering. Wang then gets angry for being slapped, while Sehyun looks at him in shock. Sehyun looks scared while Wang asks if he can't wash his hand there, calling Sehyun a fool for slapping him, and tells Sehyun to follow him outside. At the same time, in the teacher's lounge, there's a meeting. The principal calls Professor Hank Young to talk. She is surprised, wondering what could be happening. The principal then starts scolding her, asking why she was so quiet in the meeting. The principal also comments that he heard rumors that her students fought and broke the classroom window. All the other teachers watch as the principal scolds the professor. The principal continues, saying it was only the first day of class for the professor, and yet she couldn't control her students. The principal also comments that she is weak with them, and that's why they abuse her authority. The principal, at that moment, starts raising his voice, saying that he only chose her because he thought she could be a good teacher, and she knows that. He then says he will be keeping a close eye on her for the rest of the year. The professor just listens to all that quietly. She then looks down without saying anything, while the principal also warns that there will be an inspection visit to the school that day, and everyone must make sure there are no problems at that time. Hank Young then leaves the teacher's lounge downcast, imagining all the bad things happening at that school, such as students smoking without any problem. The professor then, still walking towards the classroom, begins to wonder why the school does nothing about the students' bad habits. At that moment, the professor passes in front of a room where some students are doing physical exercises and sees Wang slapping Sehyun's face. The professor continues to watch in shock as Wang was saying that the money Hyunwoo sent to collect was used by someone, and Hyunwoo ended up disappearing somewhere. So now he sees this shameless kid with empty hands. Wang continues to tell Sehyun that apparently the first-year students like to cause trouble. Sehyun continues crying as he listens to all that. Wang then asks the students if they are not properly taking care of them. The students in plank position reply that no, they are not taking care. Wang then becomes furious, shouting, "Damn it!" He delivers a strong kick to Sehyun's neck, saying that the first-year brats are annoying. The teacher is shocked to see all that aggression and says she recognizes the student Sehyun, as he is a student in her class. Sehyun remains lying on the floor, all broken from the kick, while Wang walks toward him, saying he will teach Sehyun a lesson and everyone should pay attention. The teacher then becomes desperate, not knowing what to do, while she hears Wang say that Sehyun will taste a metal pipe. Sehyun is all beaten up on the floor, while Wang says that getting hit with a metal pipe will hurt a lot, so he better prepare himself. The teacher then, scared, tries to gather courage to stop that aggression, but her legs start trembling, lacking strength. The teacher then falls to the ground, losing the strength in her legs, as she was terrified of that situation. She then starts reaching her hand forward and begins to wonder why she is weak. Why can't she do anything? Hank Young asked herself. She then closes her eyes and starts to remember when she was attacked by the students and how horrible that was. She shivers as she recalls that situation. The teacher then tries to gather strength to stand up and do something about it, and at that moment someone grabs her hand. She is then lifted from the ground by Gamin as he tells her not to stay on the ground, as it's dirty. The teacher is surprised to see Gamin there, while Gamin adjusts his glasses and asks the teacher not to worry about Sehyun, as he gives off the vibe that he will do everything to get into university. Gamin then clenches his fists tightly, and with a serious expression, he says that if Sehyun moves to another school, that will be a problem for Gamin. At that moment, Wang asks Sehyun why his behavior was changing. Where is the tough guy from before who slapped Wang's hand? Sehyun, bowing on the ground, apologizes, saying it was not on purpose. He thought it was someone else. Sehyun starts crying, protecting his face, and says he swears it wasn't on purpose. Seeing all that, Gamin starts entering the room. The teacher starts shouting, asking what he is doing. Gamin just replies that he will save Sehyun. After all, Sehyun will be a member of the study group Gamin will create. This brings memories to Gamin, that 3 years ago they asked him if he had a study group, but he didn't know what to answer. He remembers his mother talking to a friend of hers. Her mother's friend commented that her son gathered 3 friends in a study group, and his grades went up by 30 points. Gamin's mother thought that was amazing. While at that time, Gamin still paid attention to the conversation, his mother's friend said that served as self-motivation for her son, that kids sometimes do that teaching among themselves ends up being easier for everyone to learn. Gamin's mother was amazed at how smart those kids were. The mother's friend asks why she doesn't try offering that to Gamin. Gamin's mother then, a little anxious, stays silent for a moment, and then says that probably Gamin wouldn't be able to do something like that, as he is very shy. After all, until that day, Gamin had never brought a friend home. It turns out he always studies alone, says Gamin's mother, while Gamin paid attention to the whole conversation. Gamin, still remembering his past, recalls that he had tried to make friends several times back in school. One of the students once said that Gamin couldn't join them. Gamin was already terrified, and it only got worse when he received that answer. The group of students then starts saying that, as far as they know, Gamin is in second to last place of the worst in the class, and if the group's purpose is to teach others, how would he teach being so bad? Gamin feels embarrassed hearing that. All the students then fix their gaze on Gamin and ask him how he wanted to join the group with the worst grades in the class. Gamin, after going through all that humiliation, just lowers his head and heads towards the exit while apologizing for the inconvenience. While Gamin was still walking away, he can hear those students saying things like, "Someone as bad as him can't join the group," and also, "If Gamin joins the group, my mom will beat me," and also, "Gamin doesn't study at all, he just wants to be a leech," and things like that. Gamin had to hear all of this from the students before leaving the room. After that, Gamin still tried his luck with other students, but everyone avoided him, saying the group was full. Others pretended they didn't see Gamin. After all, for the students, having Gamin in the group would only serve to drag everyone down. Gamin was confident in a class he messaged, and they said they would think about it. Gamin was happy since they were at least considering it. Until moments later, he receives a response from the leader of that group saying that Gamin has no potential, and therefore does not fit the group's style. Gamin then, frustrated, shouts that he gives up on it. He no longer had the patience to be rejected like that, especially since in the end he wasn't good at studying anyway. Gamin was now at home, crossing out all the questions from the assignment. At that moment, his mother opens his bedroom door and begins to talk about the tutor. At that moment, she realizes that Gamin is crying and asks why he is like that. Gamin's mother then approaches him and asks what happened at school, or if he was crying like that because he got all the questions wrong again. Gamin, still crying frustrated, says it was nothing. Gamin's mother continues to worry about him as he says he doesn't understand why he is like this. Gammon then leans on the table and says he's just angry at life. Gammon still remembers when he was walking through the school hallway and saw a student commenting to others how confident he is in himself for having aced all the final exams. That student was brimming with confidence. He even bought a new pair of glasses as a representation of his confidence. Gammon was the opposite at that moment. He just watched him without any confidence in himself. However, back to the present, Gammon was already confident. He then starts heading into the room where the students are fighting. He clenches his fist, thinking that in the past he may not have been able to get along with the smart students, but at that moment, he was getting along with someone like him. At that moment, the teacher grabs Gammon's arm. Gammon looks back confused as to why the teacher was holding his arm. He continues to not understand the teacher's expression and asks why she was holding him. The teacher then, worried, asks if he wanted to fight again like the day before. She says she understands that fights are normal in that school, but school is a place to study and not to fight. Gammon is surprised while he still hears her say that violence is not allowed regardless of the situation. The teacher also says that the day before she did nothing because she was paralyzed, but today she wouldn't just stand there watching. The teacher says all this still holding Gammon, but Gammon notices how much the teacher was trembling in that situation. Gammon then looks at the teacher and smiles. Gammon says she was right. The teacher is surprised that Gammon is agreeing with her. Gammon, then seeing the fight getting worse, tells the teacher that he'll just stop it without fighting, and everything will be okay, right? At that moment, Wang was already heading towards Sehyun to punch him in the face since he didn't find any metal pipe. At that moment, a thick smoke rises towards the fight. Wang turns around asking what was happening. He then looks and sees that someone took the fire extinguisher from the room. Gammon was using that extinguisher to disrupt the entire fight. The students who were in a plank position stand up coughing because of that extinguisher cloud. Wang becomes furious, asking who ordered them to stand up. Wang sees the fire extinguisher being thrown to the ground and asks who the crazy person was who dared to disrupt that fight. At that moment, Wang sees someone approaching at full speed. It was Gammon who was saving Sehyun while his face was hidden behind a welding mask. Wang is startled to see a person appearing out of nowhere in the midst of that cloud. Wang loses his balance and falls to the ground. He looks to the side and is puzzled since a person appeared and disappeared in the same instant through the back door, and to make matters worse, took Sehyun with him. The teacher at that moment was surprised at how Gammon dealt with the situation, saying that at least he handled it without fighting, but she wonders if it wasn't too conspicuous here. After all, there was a huge smoke coming out of that room because of the extinguisher. After all this, Gammon then lifts his welding mask to Sehyun. Sehyun can't believe it was Gammon and says that even in a situation like that he followed him. Sehyun embarrassedly said yes, and as a thank you, Sehyun could create a study group with him, said Gammon. Sehyun wasn't in the mood for studying or anything like that. He asks Gammon what he will do if they are found out by them. Gammon, not understanding anything, asks, "Found out? Found out by who?" Sehyun, shocked, asks if Gammon was joking for not knowing what it was about. He explains to Gammon, asking why Gammon thinks Yusong School is called the Four White Leaders. Sehyun explains that it's called that because of the brutality of the sons of the White Leaders gang in Incheon. They have had this brutality since childhood. Gammon then interrupts all this explanation, saying that he doesn't care about any of that. It just means that these people don't care about studies, so he doesn't care about it. Gammon then asks how he is feeling after all that fight. Sehyun is surprised that Gammon is not afraid of those people. Gammon then begins to ask if Sehyun doesn't think about changing schools because of that fight. Gammon hopes not. Gammon then explains that all he wants is for Sehyun to join his study group. Sehyun gets irritated hearing that nonsense and shouts that he doesn't want that he could only be kidding with him. Sehyun, still annoyed, begins to say that Gammon is a clown for intervening like that, and if Gammon didn't think he could have made the situation much worse. Gammon then asks what he meant by that. Sehyun, furious, says that a boy like Wang doesn't usually hunt down someone he's already finished. If a person is marked by Wang, the only thing that weak person can wish for is for him to end their suffering as quickly as possible. Gammon is surprised to hear all that. Sehyun, frustrated with the situation he finds himself in, runs away from Gammon, saying that because of Gammon, Wang didn't finish his job against Sehyun, so he will come finish this job later, and that will be bad for him. Sehyun gets irritated, saying that Gammon may not care about delinquents like Wang, but Sehyun does because he is afraid of them. Sehyun, enraged, says that there is something more important than studying. His safety comes first. Sehyun turns to Gammon and asks why he's acting so innocent. If Gammon doesn't care about anything, then why is he covering his face with that welding mask? Sehyun asked. Gammon is shocked to hear that because it was true. Sehyun moves on while Gamin stays on the ground lamenting the situation he created. Before Sehyun could get away, Wang finds him saying that he finally found where he was. Sehyun panics when faced with Wang. Wang had a scary look. Wang asks if Sehyun really thought he could hide by leaving a bunch of foam trails. Wang laughs at how that school was full of idiots. While Sehyun looks scared at Wang, Wang asks who the idiot was with the welding mask. After all, if that idiot showed up to save Sehyun, then it means they are friends, said Wang. Sehyun says they are not friends. Gamin hears everything from across the street. Gamin then hears Sehyun say that he has no idea who the man with the welding mask was. Gamin is surprised to see that even cornered, Sehyun didn't rat him out. Even in fear, he didn't snitch on who the masked man was. Wang then starts cursing at Sehyun, saying that Sehyun is crazy for lying to him. Wang says he was getting impatient while Sehyun could only tremble in that situation, trying to say he really doesn't know who the masked man is. Even though Sehyun was in shock and crying, Wang says it didn't matter, that at that moment he would beat Sehyun and make sure it took a long time to do so. Gamin, hearing all that, puts his hand on his mask and remembers Sehyun saying that safety was more important than studies. Wang then grabs Sehyun's shirt, saying he will beat him so much he'll pee himself. Then Wang says he will record it for everyone at school to see. It was good he was willing to die, Wang said. Sehyun was paralyzed with fear in that situation. Suddenly, Wang takes a strong kick to the face and flies away, falling hard to the ground. Sehyun, startled, looks to the side thinking that couldn't be Gamin. He then sees that the kick did come from Gamin. Sehyun then despairs, wondering why he was there to fight. After all, Sehyun just said he didn't know the masked man, so why did he appear wearing the mask? Gamin then looks at Sehyun smiling and says he will make his only focus be just studying. With that, would you join my study group? Gamin asked excitedly. Sehyun is surprised to hear all that, but also outraged that he was talking about studies in such a delicate situation. Gamin then asks if Sehyun really wants to go to university. Gamin also explains that Sehyun doesn't need a survival strategy, but rather, at that moment, before Gamin finishes his sentence, Wang comes speeding to punch Gamin in the face, saying he is such an idiot for interfering. Gamin then easily dodges that punch and continues his explanation to Sehyun, saying that the strategy he should adopt should be thinking about getting into university. Wang can't believe Gamin easily dodged that punch. Sehyun is also surprised to see Gamin effortlessly dodging. Gamin, not caring about Wang's presence, continues saying that Sehyun needs to think of a strategy with him so that both can get into university. Sehyun asks him to stop that and pay attention around. Wang gets excited and prepares to strike again, which is also easily dodged by Gamin, and all the while, Gamin tries to convince Sehyun to join him in the study group. Wang doesn't believe that, and imagines that apparently, the first dodge wasn't just luck. Wang then, looking at Gamin's mask, begins to say that even though Gamin keeps explaining this nonsense about the study group, Gamin was paying attention to all of Wang's movements. Wang gets all excited, saying that Gamin was a very interesting guy. Wang then starts talking to Gamin, saying that he finds it simple to say, "fuck it" to your safety, will make Sehyun more focused on studying. Wang then gets excited, asking Gamin if he understands what all that means. Sehyun becomes worried about the direction the conversation between the two is taking. Wang then, throwing punches in the air, explains to Gamin that even though people keep saying the world is about money and power, in that school things are different. Their power is about each one's fists. Basically, at Yusong School, it's a place where your fists define your power. After saying this, Wang throws another punch towards Gamin's mask, still saying that that place was not a place that could be easily changed, especially by a person like Gamin. Sehyun then closes his eyes, as he didn't want to see that punch to Gamin's face, because he agreed with everything that was being said. To Sehyun, that school really couldn't be changed. Sehyun starts to remember that even the atmosphere of that school was terrible. It wasn't something that could be easily changed by one person. Wang's punch then heads towards Gamin's face. The mask then flies up, but Gamin had blocked the attack. He threw the mask away himself. Wang is shocked by that block, while Gamin asks him why he likes fighting so much. Wang sees Gamin holding onto his arm and can't believe the strength Gamin has. He couldn't break free. Gamin then explains that, although he said he wouldn't fight, he would have to do something about it. Wang gets even angrier and tells Gamin to let go of his hand while Wang moves to throw a right punch. Gamin then easily parries the punch. Gamin then raises his hand and slaps Wang hard in the face, knocking him to the ground. Gamin is startled as he did that on instinct. It wasn't his intention to slap him. Wang is speechless on the ground, saying that no matter what he did, he couldn't hit Gamin at all. Gamin then turns to Sehyun, whispering that probably everything would be okay now, so he asks Sehyun to make a study group with him. Sehyun stays silent for a few seconds, looking at Gamin in disbelief that Wang was defeated so easily. Gamin then, worried about that look, asks Sehyun if he doesn't feel like studying. Sehyun starts to think about studying. He starts to remember that every time he tried to study, he was attacked by someone. Sehyun also remembers that at home, he was always scolded by his drunk father, who always told him to study engineering so he wouldn't be a bum like he already was. Sehyun then looks confident, smiles, and answers that yes, he does want to join Gamin in his study group. Gamin is surprised by the answer. Gamin then turns to the wall while Sehyun is confused seeing that. Gamin starts celebrating, thinking that he finally succeeded. At that moment, he managed to recruit Sehyun for his group. Sehyun still doesn't understand those expressions Gamin was making. At that moment, Gamin looks up and sees the school bell ringing. It was time for everyone to return to class. The two then run back to the classroom while Wang gets up all beaten from the ground. Wang couldn't hide how impressed he was with what just happened. Just him, the leader of the White Comrades, was beaten like that. At that moment, he only hears someone saying the word, "lost." Wang doesn't hear it at first while he was still indignant with all that, while biting his own mouth. Again, someone tells him, "You lost." This time he hears it and turns quickly, asking who the idiot was talking to him. However, Wang is scared to see that the person in question was Hanwoo, the son of the chief of the white leaders. Wang, trembling, asks if Hanwoo saw everything that happened. Hanwoo starts walking towards Wang, saying that he went out to get ramen, and at that moment, saw a white trail, and decided to follow to see where it led. Wang is scared hearing all that, while Hanwoo explains that it was an incredible situation, since someone who studied kickboxing for 4 years was beaten like that. Hanwoo then orders Wang to get up. Wang says yes. As he gets up, Wang asks what he wanted. Hanwoo prepares and punches Wang squarely in the face. Wang then flies to the ground again, screaming in pain. Hanwoo then approaches him and asks which punch was stronger, his or Gamin's. Wang couldn't answer, because of the pain he was feeling at that moment. Hanwoo is surprised by the appearance of this mysterious guy, who apparently also defeated Hyunwoo. Hanwoo says he heard Gamin say, "A school that will help focus on studies." Hanwoo found that interesting. Wang continues on the ground, writhing in pain. Hanwoo then says that a boy who keeps talking nonsense like this hope crap should learn a lesson about what reality is like. We return to the scene with Gamin, with Hanwoo wondering how long his determination will last. The janitor at this moment is throwing away all the garbage from the school, which has a lot of cigarette butts. The janitor complains that it's too much exaggeration just for an inspection, as if the king were visiting the school. While the janitor is throwing away all that garbage, he starts to think about how to improve a reputation if there is no reputation at that school to be improved. He remembers the principal giving him that order and even calling him bald, but his bald head was charming. The janitor is bothered by all the smell coming from the trash and throws the trash can on the ground while covering his nose because of the bad smell. The janitor is irritated to be in that situation, saying that he has been working there for many years, and yet the principal has no consideration, ordering him to do this kind of job. However, at that moment an idea comes to the janitor. He thinks he has the perfect person to do this kind of job. He then goes in search of that person. Now we move to the teacher who is at school washing clothes. The teacher is very focused on the task. She then stops for a second and starts to think that Gamin was very reckless doing what he did with that fire extinguisher. The teacher says that at least she is free for the next 2 hours, but she is startled to think that she needs to clean all that up before the janitor shows up. After all, he will scold her if that happens. She begins to remember that all this happened because she forbade Gamin to fight to prevent that cowardice, so all she could do was clean that place to make up for it. The teacher then begins to remember how Gamin was excited about studying, asking her to help him study, and even Gamin going to save Sehyun so that Sehyun can join and become a member of his study group. She was happy to know that she could help in some way. At that moment, she is startled to hear the janitor's group saying that they finally found her. The janitor then enters, says good morning, and asks what a math teacher was doing in that lab. The janitor also asks if she forgot that the school would have an inspection that day. She is speechless, while the janitor still questions why, instead of preparing in her area for the inspection, she was idling in the lab. The janitor then notices that there is a strange mess in the place and runs his finger over it to check what it is. He then realizes that everything was dirty, as if someone had used a fire extinguisher inside. The janitor then leaves the lab with hatred in his heart, wondering who the clown was who did all that. The desperate teacher asks him to wait a minute, but he doesn't listen to her. He then walks to the lab exit cursing everyone, saying that he is not an idiot for the students to play around like that. As he approaches the exit, he sees a student walking nearby. The student then turns to the janitor. The janitor takes advantage of the presence of that student and asks if he knows who did that to the lab. The student then says that he does know who it was. The janitor, surprised, then asks, "Who was it?" The teacher runs towards them, trying to prevent them from handing Gamin over to the janitor. The desperate teacher asks them to wait a minute as she will explain the situation. The student then says that it was actually him who did it, and even apologizes for what happened. The teacher is puzzled as to why that student was blaming himself. The janitor then asks Gunyob why he did that. He then smiles slightly, saying that he knew about the inspection that would happen that day, and as he noticed that there was no fire extinguisher in that lab. Gunyob tried to help by getting another fire extinguisher, but accidentally caused all that. The teacher is surprised to see the student so calm in front of the janitor, who was scary. The janitor then smiles, saying that he understood the situation. Gunyob also smiles back. The teacher has no idea what was happening there. Gunyob then tells the janitor not to worry, that he would help clean up the entire laboratory and that the janitor could go ahead since he was very busy with the whole school inspection. The janitor says okay then. But before leaving, the janitor turns back and shouts at teacher Hank Young to follow him, since there is a lot of stuff in the school that needs to be done, and he would need her help. The two then walk away while Gunyob is crouched down, asking them to do their best for the school. The teacher leaves confused, not understanding anything that happened there. Now, in the classroom, Sehyun and Gamin are studying. Sehyun suggests if it wouldn't be better for Gamin to give up studying. Gamin is startled to hear that. Sehyun explains that he's not so bad at studying, but Gamin is really bad at it, and maybe that's not his thing. Sehyun continues to try to explain the subject, asking if Gamin really didn't understand. Sehyun explains that the Pythagorean theorem is something from middle school. Gamin responds that he remembers, but vaguely. Sehyun looks at Gamin, while Gamin explains that for some reason, he can't remember when he sees the equations. Sehyun finds that situation sad, and asks Gamin why he wants to study so much if it's not his thing. Gamin remains silent. Sehyun then comments that apparently Gamin regularly exercises, and then asks if Gamin, with all that athletic ability, isn't interested in becoming an athlete. Gamin responds that he is not interested in going down that path. Gamin then, embarrassed, says that he heard a saying once that said, "A healthy mind comes from a healthy body," and it was after hearing that saying that he started training. Besides that saying, he also heard one that is, "Stamina is important for studying." Sehyun can't believe what he was hearing. Gamin then becomes a little more serious and tells Sehyun that he seems to be very smart, so he asks why Sehyun decided to enter that school. Sehyun remains silent, and then stands up saying that it was because his parents don't like it when he is studying. Gamin is confused and asks how they don't like it when you study. Sehyun throws a yellow notebook on the table. Gamin takes that notebook in his hand and asks what that notebook was. It looked like an old notebook. Gamin then opens the notebook while Sehyun explains that when he can't understand something, he reads that notebook. Basically, he looks for things that don't exist in basic books and compiles them in that notebook. Sehyun gets excited in the explanation and says that he calls that book the Book of Simplicity, but in Gamin's view, it may just be a notebook of notes. Everything about 9th grade math is in that book, Sehyun explained. Sehyun still explains that if Gamin goes back slowly learning everything he has since 9th grade, maybe Gamin can evolve from super bad to just bad. Gamin gets excited to hear that since the idea was interesting. At that moment, a chair flies towards the two with a voice saying, "Don't get cocky." The chair then hits Gamin squarely, making his glasses fly up. It was Wang who had kicked the chair at Gamin. Wang then orders all the students to leave that room and only Gamin to stay inside. Wang then, with his face all beaten up, says that that day they will learn high school stuff. Wang then remembers the conversation he had with Hanwol, saying that Wang was a failure for losing to Gamin. Wang fills with anger remembering all that, saying that there is no way he lost to a failure like Gamin. Gamin then puts his hand to his head, which is bleeding a lot from the chair hit. Wang then takes the yellow notebook in his hand and starts reading. Wang then realizes that the two were studying and finds that notebook very interesting, since it was extremely detailed in information. Wang even says that they are crazy for the amount of notes that were in that notebook. Wang then takes out a lighter and makes a sinister face, saying that that trash has no use other than to be incinerated. Gamin then becomes furious while his face is covered in blood from the chair hit. At that same moment elsewhere, the teacher was walking around the school until she spotted a trash can full of cigarette butts. She then notices that strong smell and wonders why there are so many trash cans full of cigarettes all over the school. She wonders when the school will stop neglecting the students. A few meters away, the school administrator was walking with the school inspector. The inspector then says that Yusong School failed to meet the freshman quota. The vice principal tries to explain that it's hard to find a job these days. It turns out that the percentage of students who find a job is also dropping. The vice principal tries to explain to the vice principal that Yusong School is valued by students and parents because of the percentage of students who get a job. So it wasn't fair to make that comparison. The inspector just sighs before responding. The inspector then turns to the vice principal and asks if he really believes that the real reason Yusong School can't fill the freshman quota is because of the low employment rate. The vice principal starts to worry about where the conversation is heading and says that if Yusong School still messes up in the future, he will find out who is responsible. The inspector then says that they from the educational committee will conduct a very strict measures such as scholarship inspection, financial audit, etc. The vice principal starts to worry, saying that it's not necessary. At that moment, the inspector spots the teacher doing something up ahead and asks the vice principal what was happening there. The vice principal, already worried, responds that it was nothing, that he didn't need to worry. The vice principal then turns to the school monitor and starts whispering, asking why he didn't clean up all the cigarette butts as he ordered. The monitor Tom panics and says that he ordered teacher Hunk Young to do it, and he doesn't know why she hasn't done it yet. The monitor, as he watches the teacher, decides to approach her. As he approaches teacher Hunk Young, she bends down and apologizes if she's interfering with something. The inspector remains silent for a moment. While she was bent down, she hears the inspector say, "Have we met before?" She's surprised to hear that. She then lifts her head and, with a slight smile, says that it would be impossible, since she was a new teacher who had just started working at that school. The inspector asks her if she's sure about that, because she seems very familiar to him. At that moment, the vice principal interrupts the inspector, asking them not to stand there, as they still need to go to the laboratory area. The vice principal adds that all the equipment has been replaced with newer models. He then begins to explain that he adopted a method for the safety of the students. However, before the vice principal could finish his sentence, Sehyun arrives running, calling the teacher. Sehyun then, with some desperation, approaches her and says it's an emergency. The class monitor, already angry, enters the conversation and asks what's going on. Why is there so much shouting? Sehyun begins to try to explain what's happening in the classroom. Sehyun looks completely scared and screams that the room is on fire, while other students are outside the room watching all the confusion. Inside the room are Gamin and Wang, while the room is on fire. Wang had set fire to Sehyun's yellow book. Gamin becomes extremely angry, asking how dare he set fire to that notebook. He criticizes Wang for not knowing the value that book has. Wang then starts to smile, intimidating Gamin, saying that it was good he burned that useless book. He even asks Gamin not to worry about the book. After all, he will be the next one Wang will burn. Gamin then, extremely furious, says that if it's a fight that Wang wants, a fight he will have, and he better not regret it. At that moment, Sehyun is still with the monitor and the teacher. The teacher asks if there really was a fire in the classroom. Sehyun remains silent without reaction. The inspector watches all of this while the vice principal hangs his head, not saying a word, ashamed of the situation before the inspector. The monitor then becomes furious and starts asking in which classroom the fire was happening because of the fight. The vice principal pretends to be concerned about the situation as he is in front of the inspector and asks Sehyun what he was talking about. Sehyun and the teacher are surprised by all the commotion the vice principal was making. The vice principal then pulls the monitor aside to talk, asking the monitor why the alarm didn't go off. The monitor doesn't like the situation, as the vice principal was fully aware that the alarms weren't working. The inspector becomes worried about the whole situation, imagining that the school's vice principal only thinks about themselves, and if there really is a fire in the school and the alarm doesn't go off, that would be a complete disaster. The vice principal, completely worried about the situation he is in, whispers to the monitor saying that he will try to lead the inspector to the laboratory. The monitor is outraged by the situation, as the vice principal is treating the situation with indifference, even knowing that the alarm didn't go off. The vice principal acts as if nothing had happened. Teacher Hank Young is speechless in that situation, especially when she sees the vice principal giving an order to go to the supply room to change a light bulb. She is shocked to see that the vice principal will not do anything about the fire. The director then starts to lead the inspector elsewhere, telling him not to worry, as all the commotion was being caused by just a broken light bulb. The director even tells the inspector that, in that semester, he emphasized the importance of a comfortable study environment, and yet the students were exaggerating a bit. The monitor, watching from afar, imagines how the director has a good way with words to deceive others. The monitor then turns to talk to the teacher, but she had already left. The monitor imagines that just because the mess is from her class, she simply left like that. The teacher is then running with Sehyun. She asks if he's sure it's in her classroom. Along the way, the teacher takes the opportunity to ask what happened for the classroom to be like that. Sehyun feels a little embarrassed to answer, but decides to tell what happened. All the students were in the classroom until Wang decided to tell everyone to leave the classroom urgently, and no one was to stay inside, except for Gamin. Everyone starts to leave, but nervous. Wang then starts flipping through the yellow notebook, saying that notebook was crazy with all those notes. Wang then decides to set fire to the notebook with his lighter. After setting fire to the notebook, he throws it on the ground. Gamin then jumps towards the notebook trying to save it, even though he's injured. Sehyun was impressed by Gamin's attitude. Wang, on the other hand, looks down to see Gamin trying to save that notebook. The problem is that the burning notebook fell next to a bag. Sehyun then runs towards Gamin, shouting for him, but Wang stands in his way and asks what he was doing there, since Wang already ordered everyone to get out of that room. Sehyun is scared by Wang's shouts. Sehyun, already trembling with fear, becomes even more afraid when Wang says to Gamin to wait, that first he would beat up Sehyun, since apparently he doesn't seem to know how to listen. Sehyun, scared, runs out of the room, apologizing to Gamin. He stops for a moment, lamenting being so weak, and starts to think that he would like to help in some way. He closes his eyes and clenches his teeth, frustrated for not being brave enough to face that situation. Sehyun then clenches his fist, lamenting for not being able to do anything. Gamin is badly injured in the head from the chair hit. He looks ahead as Wang orders him to get up. Wang then starts confronting Gamin, asking how dare he sit silently after Wang punched him, and that Gamin shouldn't think that they've settled their score. No, because their fight hasn't even begun yet, Wang said. The students outside warn that the fire is spreading and wonder whose backpack is near the fire. Gamin despairs at seeing the fire spreading to the backpack. Gamin, being distracted, doesn't notice a kick coming towards him. He tries to block it, but can't defend completely. Gamin looks back at the book and starts to think that if he doesn't do something about it, the fire will spread to the entire room. Wang realizes that Gamin isn't even paying attention to him, and that makes him furious. Wang then tries to grab Gamin's head, saying that damn burning piece of paper means nothing to him. Gamin, looking towards the fire, just says, "Wait," and slaps Wang's face and walks towards the fire. Gamin starts running towards the fire, shouting that he can't believe that was happening. The students outside the classroom wonder what just happened inside. Is it their impression, or is Wang lying on the ground? Sehyun couldn't look inside the room, still apologizing to Gamin for being so cowardly. The students then start wondering if Wang tripped over something or something like that to have fallen like that. After all, he is part of the 4 leaders. Sehyun opens his eyes, paying attention to that conversation. Gamin, at that moment, can only look at the backpack burning, imagining that it must have burned everything inside. Meanwhile, the students outside the class begin to shout, saying how unlucky Gamin is to have become the target of the 4 leaders. Gamin then closes his eyes, unable to accept what was happening, while the students outside the room ask, "Who is Gamin after all?" Sehyun then watches from outside how Gamin will react to that situation. Gamin then opens his eyes and gets furious, calling Wang an idiot. Gamin then clenches his fists, still angry, and starts complaining that he had been waiting for help for so long, and Wang managed to ruin that. Wang then gets up from the floor, kicking a chair up. He then approaches Gamin, asking if this idiot couldn't pay attention to his surroundings. Wang is surprised by what Gamin said. Gamin told him to apologize. So, while the room is still on fire, Gamin tells Wang to apologize to Sehyun for burning his notebook. The students outside the class recognize Sehyun's name and wonder if he wasn't nearby. But looking to the side, they realize that Sehyun was no longer there. Gamin, seeing the notebook being burned, asks how Wang dares to do that. He doesn't even know the value that notebook has. Wang can't believe all the nonsense he's hearing, and says that Gamin should be grateful for using the notebook as fuel. But Wang tells Gamin not to worry. After all, he will be the next fuel for that fire. Gamin then closes his eyes, trying to relax, and says that if Wang wants to fight so badly, then he accepts. Wang then grabs a chair and runs towards Gamin, saying that he will grant his wish to fight, but that he will take a beating from his senior. Gamin then takes advantage of Wang's careless feet and pulls his foot with his own, making Wang lose his balance. Gamin takes the opportunity to ask if Wang really considers himself a senior. Gamin then starts punching Wang's face. Gamin doesn't stop delivering blows, one after another, all on Wang's face. Wang then, cursing Gamin with all possible names, says he can't understand these strange punches from Gamin. Gamin, not caring about what he's saying, comments that he doesn't care if Wang is a senior. After all, he won't contribute anything to Gamin's studies. However, Gamin wants him to at least let him study in peace. Wang gets furious hearing this, saying that Gamin is such an idiot for wanting that. Wang, desperate to win the fight, grabs the flaming backpack and throws it towards Gamin, telling him to die. Gamin then crouches down a bit and uses his leg to catch the flaming bag. He then starts maneuvering the bag with his leg even though it's on fire. Wang looks at him, but can't believe what he's seeing. Wang starts spinning around like crazy, still with the bag on his foot. He then kicks towards Wang's chin, along with the bag on fire. Wang is knocked out instantly, and his tooth is broken. At that same moment, the teacher and Se-hyun are running, almost reaching the classroom, when suddenly they see Wang being thrown with all force out of the room, even breaking the door in the process. Wang falls to the ground completely defeated. Gamin then runs and grabs Wang by the neck, telling him not to dare faint, that Gamin will only allow him to faint after he apologizes to Se-hyun. Se-hyun and the teacher look scared at the two, while Gamin tells Se-hyun not to worry. However, Se-hyun tells Gamin to look to the side, because there was another problem. Gamin then turns around and comes face to face with the inspector observing that scene. The monitor then tells the vice principal that he thought they would be in the laboratory. So why are they there with the inspector? The vice principal is on his knees, scared by that situation. Gamin then, with his face full of blood, looks at the person standing next to him and asks who he is. The inspector calmly then just asks what their names are. After that, still at the school, the principal hits the table, demanding attention. The vice principal is arguing with teacher Hank Young, saying that he told her countless times to pay attention to the students so they wouldn't cause trouble. The vice principal, worried about the situation, asks how she let a fire happen in the school just on the day the inspector is at the school. And to make matters worse, with students fighting. At that moment, the inspector was on a call, while the vice principal still says that Principal Lee hates when the education minister is involved and even asks how he would react if he received an explanation like that. The vice principal also asks her what the problem is with student Gamin, that he didn't even put out the fire, that instead he made another student faint, who was also his senior. The teacher, already trembling with worry, says it's not quite like that. The stressed vice principal walks around bumping into everything, shouting for her to stay out of the way. He is heading towards the door, saying that all of that is crap and that he will have more disciplinary actions. The vice principal, still stressed, says that the students only know how to fight and that they never study when asked, and that another piece of trash student has appeared out of nowhere. Teacher Hank Young is shocked hearing all of that and starts to remember Gamin and Se-hyun trying hard to form a study group. The teacher clenches her teeth, enraged, and calls the vice principal's attention. The teacher listens, but realizes that someone was opening the door at that moment. Upon opening the door, he realizes it's the inspector who was there. Teacher Hank Young also gets scared, not imagining that the inspector would return so soon. The vice principal then, looking at the inspector, asks if he finished the call. The vice principal then asks them to go to another room to talk so they can continue explaining about the fires, that it's not so common. The inspector then, without much delay, asks the vice principal if he will be the only one to pass on information to that student. The vice principal then asks if he was referring to Gamin. The teacher then, worried about all of that, hears the inspector say that she needs to accompany them too when they go talk to the student. At that moment, several students were gathered. The students were looking inside a room, asking if that person was the one who fought. The students start gossiping that the student inside that room was the one who hit student Wang and beat him brutally. Another student says that Gamin is crazy for hitting one of the 4 white leaders. Another student gossips that the fight actually happened while the classroom was on fire. Gamin was sitting alone inside that room. He looked worried about the situation he got himself into. He puts his hands on his head, desperate for getting so blinded by anger just on the day the inspector was at the school, and if Gamin gets expelled, his mother will be very sad about it. He then closes his eyes, imagining the worst could happen, and at that moment someone opens the door. Gamin starts shaking all over, but realizes it's Se-hyun who was there, and not the vice principal. Se-hyun then enters and closes the door while Gamin asks why he's there. He could get into serious trouble for being inside. Se-hyun then smiles and tells him not to worry. After all, the leader of the study group is being unfairly persecuted, so Se-hyun, as a member, should at least show his face to help. Gamin is amazed to hear being called a leader, while Se-hyun says that it seems Gamin is very easy to please, as he was happy with so little. Se-hyun smiles, but still continues to worry about that situation. Sehyun then takes the opportunity to ask why Gamin went so far. After all, it was just a burned notebook and it's okay to get angry, but wasn't it necessary to continue like that? Gamin then feels embarrassed and says that he got angry because Sehyun worked so hard on those notes, so Gamin couldn't stand seeing the notebook burned like that. Sehyun is surprised to hear that. Gamin then explains that normally he is not able to keep his ideas in order. Everything he starts studying gets messed up in his head. But when he saw that notebook and all that organization, Gamin thought it was incredible. Gamin says that he can even imagine all the excitement Sehyun must have put into those notes, since the organization was amazing. Gamin then says that, thinking about all that effort, and how all that turned into ashes in seconds, Gamin lost his mind, and that's why he retaliated in that fight. After hearing this, Sehyun hands the glasses to Gamin and says that actually Sehyun was there to deliver those glasses. Gamin, surprised, says that it was true. He had even forgotten that the glasses flew away because of the fight. Sehyun explains that he found the glasses while cleaning the classroom, since the fire caught in several desks. Gamin would thank him, but Sehyun thanks him first. Gamin, surprised, asks why he was thanking him. Sehyun then, embarrassed, says that thinking about it, he never thanked Gamin for what happened in the workroom or even in the classroom. Sehyun then says that for that reason, they will join forces to help each other. Gamin smiles happily hearing that. At that moment, the vice principal opens the door forcefully and shouts, saying that he ordered Gamin to reflect on his actions, but instead, he was just chatting. Sehyun looks to the side, saying that now the situation is screwed. The vice principal, the inspector, and the teacher then enter the room, and the vice principal shouts at Sehyun to get out of that room. After all, there's no reason for him to stay inside. Some time passes inside the room, and Gamin explains everything that happened and why he acted that way. The vice principal says he can't believe he did all that because of a burned book. The vice principal gets stressed thinking about how he will handle that situation with the inspector. The vice principal then starts shouting at Gamin, saying that he brought violence into the school and that it's not the attitude of a disciplined student. The teacher starts getting angry hearing the vice principal shout like that at Gamin. The vice principal, worried about how the inspector will react, turns around and says that all schools have problematic students like Gamin, and he doesn't need to worry, as the school will handle it appropriately. The teacher then gets furious and asks him to wait, please, still says that the only one to blame for all that is the student from class 2 called Wang. Teacher Hank Young still says that Wang is always asking about all the students, besides being affiliated with a criminal gang called White Leaders. The vice principal is shocked to hear the teacher saying all that in front of the inspector. The vice principal then tries to distort things, telling the teacher to stop making up stories, as there's no such thing as White Leaders and a criminal gang in that school, so she should stop talking nonsense and spreading false rumors. The vice principal then turns to the inspector and asks him not to jump to conclusions from that false story, and also says that problematic students like Gamin are rare. But in that situation, they will open a violence committee and then expel Gamin. Gamin is shocked to hear that. The teacher then starts shouting at the vice principal while Gamin is still paralyzed by the situation he's in. The vice principal tells the teacher to be quiet, as the school is responsible for punishing those who do all that. Gamin can't change his worried expression about that situation. The fight between the teacher and the vice principal continues, while Gamin remains in shock. Gamin remembers what Se-Yun said to him a short time ago, that they will help each other from now on, but all that was about to be lost if Gamin is really expelled. The vice principal then starts leading the inspector to the door, asking him not to worry about it. The teacher then asks them to wait since the culprit of that was Wang, and not Gamin. The teacher then gets even more furious and shouts loudly that the only one to blame for all that was not the students but that damn school. The vice principal and the inspector are shocked to hear that. Gamin then watches the teacher say that the school doesn't know how to aim in the right direction. The school only cares about giving attention to an inspector instead of 400 students. The vice principal is still forced to listen to teacher Hank Young say that teachers shouldn't pay attention to an inspector, but should pay attention to the students. The inspector is surprised to hear all that, while the teacher still says that if Gamin is expelled, she will protest even more until she is fired, and that she will not be a victim of the terrible actions of the administrative system. The teacher, still nervous, continues venting, saying that she will never be like the vice principal, who gives up so easily on students. The inspector then smiles hearing all that, and says that now he remembers her, that she was the best candidate to pass the high school certificate exam, Hank Young Lee. At that same moment, elsewhere in the school, there are some students looking at a door wondering why there are no teachers around. The other responds that a room caught fire, so the teachers needed to have an emergency meeting. The student complains that he needs some medicine and can't get it since Wang was locked inside the infirmary. The students then comment that Wang was beaten up by a student from class 1, so Wang is probably weak, probably pretending to be strong to move up the ranks. At that moment, a huge man comes up behind the students and hits their heads together. The students then fall flat on the ground while this student who just arrived says that even though Wang is called a coward, it's shameful for weaklings like those students to gossip behind his back. The student then asks who was saying that. The giant student, who is the director's son and is called Chumbo, starts laughing, saying that he can indeed call Wang a retard. Chumbo starts laughing non-stop while the students move away from there. Chumbo then, looking at the door, says that Wang lost in that way because he didn't have enough energy. Chumbo still says that Wang really believes it's possible to keep fighting even with that body that looks more like a cricket's chassis, and now he's feeling sick there in the infirmary. Sung Yin then says he wants to see the situation Wang is in and prepares to kick the door. Sung Yin then kicks the door down with his kick and starts shouting at Wang that he heard he's a weakling. Sung Yin, still laughing a lot, goes to the bed and pulls the curtain, asking how Wang feels about having taken a good beating. Sang Yin then becomes serious right after pulling the curtain and gets enraged, asking what the hell was that. Back in the room where Gammon was, the fight continued. The vice principal gets worried, asking if he heard right. The vice principal chuckles lightly and says that it seems there are people like that, and others will think he's not serious if he keeps going like that. The vice principal then points his finger at Gammon's forehead, saying that Gammon wasn't a good student since he bullies and fights in school. The vice principal then turns and asks, "Isn't that right, principal?" While the principal checks his watch to see what time it is. The teacher then grabs the vice principal's hand and says that Gammon is not the kind of boy the vice principal was accusing. The vice principal gets irritated, telling the teacher to let go of his arm while she says that Gammon was forced to do all that since Wang started the fight. Gammon is surprised to see the teacher defending him like that. The vice principal then gets mad at the teacher, saying that she's only been there for 2 days and already talking like that. The vice principal then asks who Gammon was persecuted by. Who would that other person be? The teacher then lowers her head, saying that teachers should teach students how to behave better. The teacher then remembers when Gammon entered the lab to defend Sehyun, remembers holding him back from reacting violently. She still remembers explaining that school is a place to study, not to fight. She also remembers her hand trembling as she held Gammon back from fighting. After remembering all this, the teacher says that the school has turned into a forest since they were abandoning all the rules and that, whether they like it or not, there were students who chose to fight to survive. The vice principal is surprised to hear all that. The teacher further explains that the so-called right words that the vice principal mentioned earlier should be firmly applied in that school, but in the end they are more like empty words. Gammon is surprised to hear the teacher say all that. Meanwhile, the vice principal gets even more irritated, asking the teacher if she came to that school to teach him, and even does that in front of the principal. The vice principal asks if she's saying that he abandoned the students. The teacher replies that's exactly what she's saying, including that he ignored all the opinions she had given, even though they were good. The vice principal retaliates by saying she's just a temporary teacher who knows nothing. They then hear something. It was the inspector laughing at the whole situation. The vice principal calls the inspector director, asking why he was laughing. The inspector says that the vice principal was defeated, and that it was the first time he had heard something like that, especially from a teacher hired just 2 days ago. The inspector goes to the teacher saying that she hasn't changed at all. Both she and Gammon are puzzled by what he meant by that. The inspector then smiles and says that he expected that. He explains that she is the #1 candidate to pass the teacher certification test. The teacher is amazed to hear that. The vice principal is even more surprised, asking, "What do you mean teacher certification?" Gammon can't believe what he just heard, that she was the top candidate to pass, and asks if that was true. The teacher is silent, speechless. The vice principal then tells the inspector that it must be a misunderstanding. After all, there's no way a top candidate like her would want to enter a private school. The inspector says he clearly remembers her now. The inspector explains that last year she graduated from the elementary and middle school math teacher certification program. However, she never finished registering the certificate, even though the team notified her several times, and since she didn't give any feedback, the registration was canceled. The teacher remains speechless at everything the inspector was saying. Gammon, surprised by all this, asks if all that was true. He then remembers when the teacher was still his tutor, and she had mentioned wanting to pass the teacher certification exam to become a teacher in public school. He remembers her looking out the window and saying that her dream was to be a teacher who could help find the right path. That's the kind of teacher she would like to be. The inspector says he was surprised, since it's the first time he's seen something like that, and asks why she was there. The teacher still remains unresponsive. The inspector asks if the school she wants to transform was the school she was talking about. The vice principal becomes worried about everything he's hearing. He starts shouting, asking what she means by changing the school. The vice principal also says that even though she's a candidate from the teacher certification program, she's still a temporary teacher, and she can't do anything about it. The teacher then becomes discouraged hearing that, and starts to remember Gammon asking for her help so he can become a good student. She remembers saying she needed to save Gammon since he had a lot of potential for a study group. Then, looking at Gammon, she says she can start a study group. In short, she explains that she would like to start a study group. Teacher Hank Young then grabs Gammon's hand and says she wants to help Gammon in this way, and that currently this is her idea. The vice principal gets even more furious hearing that, and asks if all the help she wants to give is by creating a study group, and still bringing a gangster to the school. That was a waste of time. The vice principal then asks the inspector to end that useless conversation there. The inspector then ponders for a moment and says that was a good idea, and that they should support her. The vice principal, worried about that, responds that even though he's the principal, an order like that has nothing to be done. The inspector then calls the vice principal's attention, while the vice principal is worried about what he's going to say. The inspector then smiles and asks if that wasn't the right thing to do. After all, the student just wants to study. The inspector still intimidates, saying it would be a shame if he had to report that school because of a fire alarm defect, and that this study group must be instructed by teacher Hank Young no matter what happens. The teacher and Gammon are happy with that. The inspector then leaves the school and opens the door of his car. Before getting into the car, he thinks that in the end Hank Young became a temporary teacher at that school, and if she wants to change that school, that would be practically impossible. The inspector then gets into his car and someone was waiting for him asking why he took so long. This person is Gunyob, who calls him dad and asks why he took so long. Jonyob's hands were completely covered in blood. Jonyob says he was worried that time wouldn't be enough, but it turns out he worried for nothing. The inspector, looking in the rearview mirror, responds that yes, he did take too long. The inspector, looking at those bloodied hands, says he saw the picture Jonyob sent and asks if he got a little carried away, didn't he? Jonyob just smiles, saying it was more than deserved and that he probably got the message he wanted across. Back in the infirmary, Sangin was looking at Wang and couldn't believe it. Sangin gets enraged, asking who the hell did that to Wang. Wang was completely beaten up with blood all over his body and his hands were tied. Jeonyob asks his father if it's not the school's fault that students break the rules so much. The inspector responds that's right, that since the fault lies with the school, then it must take responsibility for it. The teacher and Gammon return to the classroom. The teacher is putting up a poster with Gammon. The teacher was pleased with the result of all that. As for the poster, it was an invitation for students who wish to join the study group, where she will be the instructor. The two then put the poster on the bulletin board, and some students gather to see what it was all about. The students don't believe that the poster was for a study group, and that it was a waste of time because only idiots would do something like that. The students start laughing, saying they can't wait to stop studying, and they want to create a group to study even more. That was so stupid, said another student. Two students start gossiping, saying it was that certain student who suggested the study group. The other student asks who that student he was referring to is. Sehyun passes by hearing that conversation. The student then, seeing the poster, responds that the student he was referring to is the boy from class 1, the one who just entered the school and already beat up Wang, and that he just entered the class and already looks like a fighting god. Another student asks why such a brutal student would be interested in studying. The students then continue spreading rumors about Gammon while Sehyun walks away from them, wondering how they can spread rumors like that. Gyeonyob was also nearby listening to the rumors, especially when they mentioned that Wang was found beaten up inside the clinic the day before. Gyeonyob also notices that there is a contact number on the poster for anyone who wants to join the group so they can contact the teacher. After that, another student approaches the poster. It was Hanwol reading the part, "A school that can focus on studying." Hanwol finds it a joke and says that Gammon did what he did fighting, and now he wants to act like a good boy. Hanwol then grabs the poster saying that he is not a good person either, and that when he sees a hopeful future like that, it makes him want to tear it up with all his might. Hanwol says this while tearing up the study group poster. Some time passes, and it's already Saturday. The teacher was walking near Gammon's house. She then stops and says that it had been a long time since she had passed by there. She is happy to remember Gammon's house since she was his tutor and went there a few times. She says it reminds her of when she was preparing for the teacher exams. She says this while watching a guard running desperately as if he was late. The guard, while running, said he was late. He was late. The teacher can only imagine that he was running like a rabbit. It looked like the one from Alice in Wonderland. The curious teacher follows him, wondering what must be happening. She then looks at a person upside down with defined abs. It was Gammon, who was exercising there. She is surprised to see Gammon so dedicated to doing physical exercises. She says that Gammon is incredible. Gammon sees that it was Hank Young who was there, and then falls to the ground scared, as he didn't imagine she would be there. Gammon then, looking at the teacher, apologizes, as he made her wait for a long time. She tells him not to worry about it. Gammon says he is really sorry since he hadn't remembered that meeting, and asks Hank Young where they are going. She then approaches him and tells him to just follow her. They then enter a store full of books. Gammon asks if that place was a bookstore. Teacher Hank Young says it was, and that books are extremely important for studies, and that she is an expert at picking books. She says this while looking at all the books on the shelves. She picks up several books and tells Gammon not to worry. She will buy them all since she asked him to make the poster. She then looks to the side and realizes she was talking to herself and wonders where Gammon went. Gammon was crouched down looking at a book with an exclusive interview with Bruce Lee. He says that finally a good book was released. The teacher says that if he liked it, he should just take it. The teacher then puts all those books on the counter. Gammon is shocked by that enormous amount of books and asks Hank Young if she really is going to buy all of them. She answers yes, that quantity should be enough for good reading. The two then sit down, and Gammon asks if he can really read all those books. Hank Young replies that of course he can. Gammon then tells the teacher that at that moment, he was quite surprised to know that she was ready to pass the teacher certification program and would become one of the top candidates. The teacher is surprised to hear Gammon say that. Gammon then lowers his head and apologizes, saying that he didn't know how incredible she was, and that from the beginning Gammon said he wanted to leave school. Teacher Hank Young then says that she only knew how to answer the exam questions, so that doesn't necessarily mean she was incredible. She then takes her drink, saying that there are many things she is still not good at, like, for example, her heart is not so strong, and passing the teacher certification exam and being a good teacher are different things. Gammon is impressed by Hank Young saying all that. The excited Hank Young asks if Gammon will help her, and that she will work hard so that Gammon also becomes a great student. While Hank Young was talking, a book flies towards her from a tantrum-throwing child who is arguing with his mother. Gammon panics and runs towards the teacher to catch the book before it hits Hank Young. He then manages to block the book, but gets so close to the teacher that it looks like he's going to kiss her. Gammon then, embarrassed, immediately moves away, becoming unresponsive, while the mother of the tantrum-throwing child apologizes for what her son did. Hank Young says that Gammon doesn't need to worry. She then puts her hand on Gammon's hair and says she's looking forward to his help, and that now they will work hard to make the study group fruitful. Still in the bookstore, Gammon comments that he's hungry and that they should eat something. She says that was a good idea, and that they should eat soon since it was late. Gammon replies that it's okay, but he will pay this time since she bought the books. Hank Young then goes back to her house, saying that it had been a long time since she had been in a bookstore, so she was excited. As she climbs the stairs, she says that she didn't even realize she spent 7 hours in that bookstore, and that Gammon was probably suffering in silence for having to stay there for so long. Hank Young then goes to her door to enter the house, but she notices that something was wrong. She wonders why the door was already open, as she remembered closing the door. Gammon, at that moment, was leaving for his house, saying he shouldn't have put so much hot sauce on his food. He then realizes that the book he took was not with him, so he probably forgot it in Hank Young's bag. He thinks about how he wanted to read that Bruce Lee book, but the book will be in her bag. Hank Young, upon entering the apartment, is startled. Hyunwoo's gang was inside her room. She asks how they all got in there. Hyunwoo asks if that's really her house. Hyunwoo then tells the teacher to put his gang in the group too, and with that, they will be able to visit her whenever they want, said Hyunwoo. Gammon, at that moment, is worried because he still has to wait 2 more days to see the teacher again and ask about the book. Gammon wonders what he should do about it. Hyunwoo, who is at Hank Young's house, slaps her and tells her to wait a moment as he will destroy everything there. Gammon is restless because he can't read the book at that moment, so he says he will go to Hank Young's house to get it. At that moment elsewhere, Sangin says the words, "Go kill." The girl sitting on the sofa says that their relationship is not that close and asks if he wants her to get angry. The blonde girl and a student are talking non-stop, while Sangin gets angry seeing that he is being ignored. Sangin then shouts for Hanwol to pay attention to him and stop chatting with the blonde. Hanwol tells him to shut up and asks why he hasn't left yet. Doesn't he realize he's watching a movie with the girl? Hanwoo says. Sangin asks if he really doesn't feel anything about what happened. Sangin starts shouting, saying that Wang ended up like that, and Hanwoo was closing his eyes to everything that was happening. Sangin, still irritated, asks him to stop with that nonsense. Hanwoo then tells him to shut up again, that his spit was flying everywhere. Sangin then apologizes. Hanwoo asks why he was so angry just because of how they treated Wang. Hanwoo explains that he is aware of the situation and that Sangin is supposedly very close to Wang. The blonde girl keeps messing with her cell phone while the two argue. Hanwoo then smiles, saying that it was nonsense, and that honestly the only thing they have in common is their parents' work. But personally, Hanwoo believes that Wang is not on their level and cannot join them. Hanwoo tells Sangin to stop for a moment, and that instead of seeking revenge they should have some fun. Sangin is outraged to hear Hanwoo say that. Hanwoo says that anyway, that was quite fun. He remembers when he met Wang, he saw a skinny boy who was never satisfied with anything until he joined the gym, and in the end, turned into a venomous person who likes to oppress others. Hanwoo still explains that whoever tastes power, changes. So Hanwoo begins to think about Gammon, and that he has already decided about him imagining how quickly Gammon will change his mind. Hanwoo then comments that he gave a crowbar to Hyunwoo, and that's how Hyunwoo managed to enter the teacher's house by breaking the door. The teacher was heading towards her house without even imagining what she would find. Hyunwoo manages to break the door and made sure to leave it open for when the teacher arrived. The teacher, upon taking that slap from Hyunwoo, falls to the ground startled by it. A gang member says that just one slap won't solve it. Hyunwoo starts to provoke, asking the teacher if she missed his hands. The teacher quickly gets up scared of those thugs. She then starts running desperately, trying to grab her phone from her pocket to ask for help. But Hyunwoo quickly runs after her, sends his hand on the door, slamming it with all his strength and making the teacher get locked inside with them. Hyunwoo then takes the teacher's cell phone and hands it to another student. The student with glasses then throws the phone against the wall, which breaks when it hits the ground. Hyunwoo then grabs the teacher from behind and asks her if she knows why people are still afraid even knowing that there is police. Hyunwoo, with a grim expression, replies that it's because the police only arrive after the crime ends. In other words, when it's already too late, and that even if the perpetrator is gone, the trauma will never disappear from the person. Hank Young cries hearing all that. Hyunwoo then throws the teacher on the ground and orders the gang members to break the whole house. Hyunwoo tells Hank Young that the trauma will be so great that she will never want to be a teacher again in her life. Hank Young is completely scared on the floor, imagining that the worst would happen there, and she doesn't know what to do anymore. Hyunwoo then grabs the teacher by the hair while she screams desperately for help. At that moment, someone kicks the door open from the outside inwards. Hyunwoo and the others look back wondering who could have opened the door. They can't see well who it was since it was dark and wonder who that bastard was. The person then enters. It was Gyeonyob, the inspector's son. He enters the house saying that he was understanding the situation. The teacher, completely scared, looks at him saying that she remembers him, that he's the same one who helped her with the monitor the other time. Gyeonyob then looks at the crowbar on the floor and says that Hanwoo is trying too hard to be elegant since he knew all that was his doing. Gyeonyob smiles and says that in the end, Hanwoo is just a thug like those kids who were mistreating the teacher. The student with glasses notices that he is wearing a school jacket, but how did he end up there? Was it a coincidence? Hyunwoo gets uneasy with that guy showing up there. Hyunwoo then asks one of his gang members to teach Gyeonyob a lesson so he doesn't disturb them anymore. The student then prepares to hit Gyeonyob and tells him not to take it personally since he was just following orders. Gyeonyob wastes no time and throws a right punch, knocking out the student instantly. Two other gang members get enraged and attack Gyeonyob. Hyunwoo then starts laughing, saying he understood the situation and even says that Hanwoo made a mistake, that Gyeonyob wasn't there by pure coincidence. Hyunwoo then looks at Gyeonyob's hand and sees that he is wearing brass knuckles, so he came there knowing that was going to happen. Hyunwoo says that probably Gyeonyob is like those hooded guys who run behind defending justice, and that's why he was doing that. Hyunwoo then smiles and asks if he got it right. Hyunwoo then positions himself and punches Gyeonyob in the stomach, saying he knows jerks like him. Gyeonyob starts to feel a lot of pain, wondering how Hyunwoo knew where to attack. Hyunwoo starts laughing, saying he knew that punching Gyeonyob's right side would hurt him more. Hyunwoo then gets excited and starts punching Gyeonyob several times, who can't defend himself because of the pain. The student with glasses approaches the fight, saying that Gyeonyob arrived full of himself, but he's in trouble now and asks if Hyunwoo knew him. Gyeonyob holds his injured rib while Hyunwoo says he met him in high school when there was an incident, and that only those involved in that incident knew about it. Hyunwoo, still smiling, says that Jeonyob does have a lot of courage. Jeonyob gets worried because Hyunwoo knows about this incident. Jeonyob looks at the teacher and sees how scared she is and thinks that he needs to stay calm at all costs since the situation isn't good. Jeonyob takes his brass knuckles, imagining that he needs to change the situation, and throws the brass knuckles at the glass above the gangsters, causing several glass pieces to fall on them. One of the glass pieces even falls on the glasses guy's forehead, making him scream in pain, saying he was stabbed and his head is bleeding. Hyunwoo then gets angry, saying that Jeonyob is using dirty tricks. Hyunwoo then, after protecting himself from the glass shards, looks into the room and sees that Jeonyob ran away when he saw he was cornered. Hyunwoo gets furious, saying they are screwed since teacher Hankyung fled with him. Hyunwoo says they need to hurry and hunt them down. Jeonyob, running with the teacher, says they need to run away from there as soon as possible. Jeonyob stops abruptly and sees they are surrounded since apparently Hyunwoo assembled a gang outside the house as well. Jeonyob gets worried about the situation he's in. The teacher's cell phone is ringing with Gamin's call while everyone starts running, saying they need to find them as soon as possible. Gamin gets frustrated for not being able to talk to the teacher by phone since she's not answering. He starts walking back depressed, thinking maybe she didn't answer because she's probably already sleeping. But it was too early for her to sleep, so that wasn't the case. Gamin starts to think if the teacher is ignoring the calls on purpose. He considers whether or not he should go to the teacher's house now, but he's worried it might seem a bit rude. Gamin says it's a shame not to know what to do. At that moment, Hyunwoo and his gang pass by Gamin's back, shouting they need to find teacher Hankyung. Gamin turns around and hears them saying they need to get rid of the teacher today. Gamin gets furious instantly, especially realizing it was Hyunwoo who was saying that. Gamin adjusts his glasses and tells him to stop right there. Jeonyob finds himself cornered as the gang surrounding them says the teacher is exactly like in the photo. The gangster says Hanwoo is a bit tough sometimes, huh? Since he asked to make the teacher never want to teach again. The gangsters look at the scared teacher, saying it's rare to find a teacher as beautiful as her, and that if she went to their school, she would be treated very well by them. Jeonyob then steps in front of her, asking her to stay behind him. The gangster then looks at Jeonyob and is surprised. He points, saying he recognizes that bastard. Jeonyob is concerned that apparently everyone there knows about the incident. The gangster says he knows everything about him. That bastard wakes you up at night if you dream about him. The gangster then tells that Jeonyob came from America in the 8th grade and took his 2nd place. Jeonyob made the gangster kneel for hitting another student. Jeonyob was only in the 8th grade, but he beat up older guys just like he did with this gangster. The gangster still remembers being quite hurt when he was beaten by Jeonyob, while Jeonyob told him to stop acting that way and not take advantage of the weak. The gangster then goes all out with a flying kick towards Jeonyob, saying he would end that rank problem right there. Jeonyob then firmly holds the crowbar he took from Hankyung's house and hits the gangster's leg with all his strength, breaking it instantly. The other gang members are afraid of what they just saw, while the gangster begins to wriggle in pain, saying he broke his leg. At that moment, Hyunwoo manages to reach the teacher, saying she shouldn't run away from her students. Hyunwoo asks where Jeonyob is, but then he sees him busy fighting the other gangsters. The teacher continues scared at this point. Hyunwoo looks at Jeonyob fighting and says he's quite lively defending himself like that. Hyunwoo then smiles and prepares to slap, saying it was a shame Jeonyob was busy and not there to defend her. The teacher then, seeing that hand coming towards her, starts to think that at first she thought those kids were good, and as the hand gets closer to her, she thinks about how she got herself into that situation. She then closes her eyes and just waits for the slap to hit her face. At that moment, Hyunwoo is interrupted. Someone grabbed his shirt. It was Gamin telling him to stop, so he should obey. Gamin says this while throwing Hyunwoo to the ground. The student with glasses can't believe what he was seeing while the teacher asks why Gamin was there. Gamin then explains that the teacher accidentally took his book, so he was going to her house to get it. Hyunwoo, full of anger, asks why Gamin showed up right there. Gamin then approaches the teacher and asks what was going on there. The teacher says it's a bit hard to explain and starts to say that a boy named Jeonyob helped her. Hyunwoo then looks at his glasses friend speaking quietly, so that the two attack Gamin at the same time. He says this while the teacher explains who Jeonyob was. The teacher then explains who he is, but Gamin just says he never heard of him or the school he came from. Gamin then looks scared and asks if Jeonyob is that boy who was being beaten up. The frightened teacher says yes, that she had to run while defending him. Hyunwoo and his friend then jump on Gamin to catch him off guard. Gamin then jumps and kicks both of them in the chin at the same time. Both Hyunwoo and the student with glasses are knocked out. They both fall to the ground while Gamin still holds their bags. Jeonyob looks at Gamin impressed with what he just saw. However, with Jeonyeob's carelessness, he took a chain in his stomach. Jeonyeob then kneels because of the pain while the cap gangster comes from behind to hit Jeonyeob in the head with a stick. At that moment, Gammon arrives with all his strength, giving a flying kick to the gangster before he could hit Jeonyeob. Gammon then grabs the piece of wood the gangster was using and prepares to fight against the last man. The chain gangster starts screaming, asking who's the idiot interfering. The chain man then attacks, but Gammon defends himself with the piece of wood. The chain gets all tangled up in the piece of wood. Gammon takes advantage of it being stuck in the piece of wood and pulls the chain from the gangster's hand. Gammon says that the situation was great. Jeonyeob observes what Gammon was doing with that piece of wood and that chain, and wonders if Gammon was trying to grab the gangster's weapons first. Jeonyeob is surprised to understand what Gammon was doing. A bald gangster then arrives and grabs a glass bottle to catch Gammon off guard. The gangster then takes the bottle and tries to hit Gammon from behind, breaking the bottle on his head. Gammon then says he managed to do what he wanted. Jeonyeob is surprised by what Gammon just did, and before the bottle hits his head, he breaks the bottle in the air. He put together a weapon using the chains and pieces of wood, thus forming a nunchaku. Jeonyeob is surprised to see that while Gammon asks if he really came from the United States, the gangsters then get up again to go back to fighting. They run towards Gammon. A motorcyclist also arrives to help. At that moment, Gammon is standing spinning his nunchaku while asking Jeonyeob if he's interested in joining Gammon's study group, as he could help with English studies for having come from the United States. Gammon spins his nunchaku frantically. Jeonyeob says that now is not the time to talk about a study group, as several gangsters were in front of him. Gammon just asks Jeonyeob to hold his bags. The gangsters start laughing, saying all Gammon knows how to do is spin that nunchaku. At that moment, Gammon's mother is in his room and sees the to-do list Gammon made. His mother smiles and says it's nice for him to have a whole schedule after the school year has started, and apparently he always does it before leaving. She then is startled to see the last item on the list. The last item was practice nunchaku. Apparently, Gammon was practicing fighting with nunchakus. And just like that, Gammon hits a gangster's face with all his strength with his improvised nunchaku. Gammon goes around knocking everyone out with his nunchaku. The bald gangster can't believe what he's seeing. He made an improvised nunchaku in the middle of the fight. The gangsters then decide to attack everyone at once so that Gammon couldn't react. Gammon then prepares to attack and hits everyone at once, precisely hitting the heads of all three with his nunchaku. Jeonyeob, impressed by what he's seeing in that fight, wonders why Gammon handed those bags to him. Does Gammon intend to fight alone against everyone? A gangster then attacks Gammon with all his strength with his stick. Gammon then sets up his Jeonyeob, wraps the chain around the stick the gangster had in his hand, takes the stick out of his hand, and kicks the gangster in the face, throwing him away. Another gangster in a blue shirt gets angry and tries to go after Gammon. But before that happens, Gammon wraps the chain around the gangster's neck and pulls him with all his strength to the ground, making the gangster hit the ground with his face with all his force. Jeonyeob is impressed with everything he's seeing, saying that he even knew that Gammon was capable of beating up Wang alone. He says this while Gammon is spinning his nunchaku frantically and positions the nunchaku under his armpit. Gammon was totally ready for the fight, and he didn't even get a scratch. Most of the gangsters were knocked out at that moment, while others were on the ground, scared. Jeonyeob sees the whole scene, saying that Gammon is completely on another level. Gammon then looks at his improvised nunchaku and regrets not being able to use it to its full potential, as it was made in a hurry. He then, sad about it, throws the nunchaku on the ground. Jeonyeob keeps looking at him, still not believing everything he just saw. As for the teacher Hankyung, still terrified, she starts shouting Gammon's name. She then runs towards Gammon, asking if he's okay, if he got hurt in any way. Gammon is a bit embarrassed and says he's fine. The angry teacher asks him not to lie. After all, he just fought a bunch of people. Gammon then asks the teacher to stay calm. At that moment, a glass bottle is broken. Gammon and the teacher look scared and see Hyunwoo bleeding from being hit in the head with a bottle. The person then says they are not satisfied with what they just did to the teacher. Jeonyeob says this while holding the crowbar and the glass bottle, ready to attack Hyunwoo with them. Jeonyeob laughs and tells Hyunwoo to say what he knows about the incident, and that if he doesn't say anything it will get much worse. Hyunwoo, not understanding, asks what the hell he's talking about.
If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and like the video. Thank you.